This is for everybody who has already met their karmic soulmate, twin flame soulmate. And for those of you who are still thinking, who is he? Who is she? Where can I find them? So before I start, I'm going to just explain to you the spread that I have developed for this occasion. So here are the significators that I'm using for this particular reading. Remember, significators mean that this is going to be the same for every sign. The reason why I'm choosing them, it's sort of like the category that I really want to find the answers to, as if you're in a bookstore and you find a book with this title. So let me explain to you the significators that I'm choosing. The first one is Luna. Luna is going to tell me about the darkness and everything that maybe still didn't surface, maybe things that you don't know, maybe things that you should know. Then we have Solar Deity. Solar Deity is going to tell us what you should know. Maybe there is like still somewhere lingering, maybe it is too bright for you, maybe it's too close to your eyes, but you're going to realize that maybe you know that. Then we have Reason. Many of us are asking, why? That's the hardest question as a therapist and as a reader to really answer, why? Because we people, we don't really make too much sense when it comes to love. So we're going to try to answer it within this card. Then we have the card guidance. Let's see, because it's your mirror soul, what do you need to find out about this person? If you guys still didn't read my introduction to this series, please check somewhere in this corner before you proceed, because it's going to tell you really how and what I see it. I see it as a mirror, and that's why this is called Mirror Healing Series. Then we are getting to the Tower, and the Tower is going to tell us about what needs to break. It is like always a time that certain things cannot grow anymore, and maybe they cannot grow because they're not sustainable. Maybe, we need to kind of change us. Maybe they need to change. Whatever it is, we're going to discover it in this category. And the Chariot, a lovely card with pushing it forward. Where do we go? Which turn do we take? And then let's check the significance of all of this. Two of Chalices. Is there a kiss that is going to happen? Or what at this point of time is karma telling us? So, guys, shall we start? Hello my dear Pisces, this is your twin flame readings for August, September. So let's see, you had cards kind of like jumping at me first, so I took more cards there for you. Another thing is like a double up with my Kipper cards. So I just realized I did a double and I usually want one, and I was like debating if I should keep it or not keep it, and then I decided, oh sure, why not, let's kind of like do it. So let's start. First and foremost, you have the Justice. You have the karmic like overview of who you are, and this is really good because almost like the scales of justice are kind of like being born out of the rose, and you really need to because Pisces sometimes tend to be overly feminine, right? And you see here we have the yin and yang, which is kind of interesting in this particular deck. When you see the Moon card, which is basically talking about Pisces, it's almost identical. Only thing we see the two fish chasing each other tails, like in your sign. So this is kind of like, and also the Six of Cups underneath. Interestingly, the Hangman. Some kind of sacrifices, something is still kind of like really prominent in your memory. The Six of Cups is that memory card, which is the Mercury retrograde, so it is something that most signs had, And look at in this particular deck, even though they're still young, they're not children like in the other decks. And if you kind of like really look closer, he is making a move, but she's standing stoically proud, but not really engaging. So now this is still telling me that there is like some kind of like status quo, and it is really telling me that there is like this some kind of like universal sense of justice at play. This is why the karma card is there, and this is kind of like why we actually do have this Queen of Cups showing up. You see, I don't know if you look at it in this deck, you are the Queen of Cups. You see this like two fish, is going to hopefully pick up. You see, they're chasing each other's tail. Everything about this deck is whimsical, and look at it, there is like this kind of like essence of promise pouring out of her cup, and she has like this kind of like really knowledge. And I think what is basically happening here, because obviously there is like this essence of something couldn't grow, because there is like this kind of like transition, almost like this kind of like boat kind of like taking us elsewhere. But look at that, how things are aligning, kind of like the moon and this kind of like Merkaba star and the sun. So there is like this kind of like knowledge, and you see all this kind of like 2, 4, 6, 7, 8. I always kept saying this is always connecting to Aquarian. So you may have a Virgo, you might have Aquarius, you might have Libra, you may have a water sign, and this is kind of like really prominently standing out those energies. So the Hermit is also really talking about, look at this kind of like flower here, fully opened up, and it's kind of like you need to kind of flourish into something. And let me see here, this hidden kind of like Libra symbol over here for those of you who care. But you see masculine and feminine in complete balance, right? And you see this night and a day on the other sides. It is kind of like very important to understand, because this is also ruled by Jupiter. This also kind of like talks about following your own star, and it almost like feels like a fallen star in this period, I do have to tell you. But it is calling for you to understand that this is a universal justice in play, and just because you want something doesn't mean it's the best for you. You know, sometimes we want it, and we even have that saying, hey, beware what you wish for, you might get it. And I have been on the receiving end of that so many times. People pray, I really want to win the lottery, I really want to, it's going to resolve my problems. Then they do win lottery, and I'm not saying don't aim for it, it's kind of still probably a cool thing. But then they kind of aim for it, they buy a really fast car, and they die, right? So what I'm saying is, like, if this is not your path, then you're going to be held back almost like in a protective box. So let's start and see. We are going to probably get more reasons for it, and also let your friends help you. The support of others will be really important for you in this period. So you have these baselines, which is clearly talking about you kind of coming into your power, getting your strength, and kind of like realizing that things maybe are happening for a reason. So let's see what's hidden for you. So you have courtship and occupation, and then you have 8 of Pentacles, and then Temperance reversed. Now, this is kind of like really important, because maybe you have met somebody at work, or maybe the person that you are wondering about is actually meeting somebody at their work, or having to deal with something not necessarily where they work, but it could be that a meeting person who is at their work at the time, just as like here we see the seamstress, so they could kind of like go to dry cleaning or something like that and strike a conversation, and that actually may have gone somewhere. This is completely unbeknownst to you, because some detail maybe that have been said has been missed. And because of that, the Temperance reversed is definitely talking about certain things not mashing, right? Just like, you see how this light is hiding in both of these kind of like instances. Here she is like really focused to just basically the small details of something that needs to be finished, something that needs to be in the perfect harmony, where here
kind of like what I find really interesting in this Temperance rendition is that she's kind of like almost like looking away if you really look at her. She also has 2 cups, just like what we have in the card of Aquarian, but also what we see over here is like that sun. The sun is kind of like hiding behind the clouds, right? So there is like definitely a card that is forcing transformation, and this is really talking about some kind of like details maybe are going to shift in kind of like your own head. But this is also talking about rebirth and comfort. It's sort of like the line in between that, but both of them came reversed, right? And keep in mind that kind of like there is a story, especially the story behind this Temperance card. And Temperance always, when it comes reversed to me, is telling me that stars do not align. Just like we don't see that here, that something is off, maybe a wrong day, maybe a wrong person, maybe a wrong situation, right? Maybe it's just like, sometimes not meant to be, which kind of like I was picking up from the Justice, like, watchful eyes. We see this kind of eyes are kind of penetrating over here. You see this light is coming over here clearly. So let me tell you about the Temperance. So I think around 600 BC before Christ, a young prince left his father's palace and his life of luxury in order to kind of like find that truth about life. Well, let's call it he was young, that's what the story says, but today we call it a middle-age crisis, when we are really truly looking for that really meaning. So he actually fled to a forest, and kind of like he took off all the clothes and all this kind of like embellishments that actually showed his basically riches. And instead he kind of like practiced like a hermit, kind of like all kind of like living life humbled, and practiced basically austerities. Now, he basically did not attain his goal. I'm sorry, the story doesn't have happy ending. But too late, he kind of actually really realized that luxury and asceticism are both extremes, and they would not bring him closer to the truth. Some people kind of like think, oh, I'm not going to be rich, and so if I'm poor, I'm living this authentic life. But this is kind of like really talking about this guy who was basically really kind of like living this life of modesty, but he actually almost like starved himself, and that's basically how he died. And the starvation only brought him the basically imminence of death, right? But you see, kind of like it's kind of like really weird, because I think, if I remember really well, that there was like sort of like some kind of housewife that kind of like came to the story and kind of like revived him when he was dying, and I think she offered him milk and rice. And hence we have this beautiful rice pudding these days as a result of the story, and I bet many of you didn't really know this. But what happened to this kind of like young prince, he gained strength back, and he was able to kind of like withstand that basically death that occurred was the death of his ego, the death of the selfishness, and kind of understanding that kind of like truth, right? And hence he became enlightened. And from that point on, he was called Buddha, the awakened one. So keep in mind that this story really tells us that people in developed countries really consider those Buddhist monks kind of like very austere, more than basically any other kind of like moderate religion, right? However, most of us are just ordinary people. We are trying to find a way of living that is going to create the least of harm and disturbance to the others, but at the same time that we are kind of like having this expression. And this is kind of like really talking about virtue. As you can see, somebody is really looking for this. So something has been hidden. Somebody did not have this virtue. Somebody was living life very selfishly. So just take the story in the opposite way, and it doesn't have to be opposite when the card reverses, that the prince was just there to grab things from the people, just to take it. It's all mine, because I have to have it. It's just like those evangelicals that they preachy, well, I have to be rich, you have to give me money so I get rich. So these are like these two opposite sides of that spectrum, right? So really, maybe somebody was telling you, well, no, I am so virtuous and this, but the truth was, and that's why kind of like I was puzzled when I saw the hangman over here. Somebody made sacrifices, and I really don't think that was them, right? It was definitely carelessness and inability to work with others over here. And occupation can just like simply say that. Somebody kind of like really didn't even care that their stories are making sense. Somebody was just kind of like blasting through it, and me and me and me, and I kind of like see this like huge selfishness, which kind of like left you with a pause. I mean, you kind of like have this big heart and kind of like are willing to kind of like hug anybody, including the trees, but this person really took advantage of that, right? Big times. So let's see what you do now on despair and official person. And you have the Magician, and then you have Six of Wands. Interestingly enough, both of them are basically kind of guided with that Mercury, and we are going to the Mercury retrograde. So I'm just like really wondering, for some of you, maybe the authority had to step in the situation. Maybe you feel isolated. Maybe this simply means that somebody is possibly divorcing you or not divorcing somebody else. It can be quite a bit of the things, but this kind of like really gives me this kind of like guarded feeling that kind of like possible separation. This kind of like again gives me the sense of you feeling really isolated. But then again, check this out. Does this look similar, familiar? It's you are being observed. You, and I don't know if you guys are religious or not, or which religion you're from, but I'm going to tell you there is like this kind of like story in the Bible, and no, I'm not asking to subscribe to any religious kind of thing, but it was a book of Job. And basically God wanted to show how powerful God is. And of course, the same story is also the very story that many people are saying do not believe in this. So I'm not passing judgment here. But the God said, look, this person is going to do everything that I say, no matter what they do. So he was torturing and killing the son, etc. And this person was still believing in him. So this kind of like is the blind faith over here. And the blind faith was us because I'm ultimately going to benefit you. So yeah, sure, maybe in the storytelling that kind of like makes sense, but how many of us would be willing to do that and go to these kind of like extremes? Now this is again telling me that something is possible to be created, and there is like definitely some kind of like sense of victorious kind of like things, because if you look at these two cards closely, both of them, he has the laurel wreath and the lion has the crown, right? So here is this lion, the king of the jungle, kind of like being completely crowned, and both of them are feeling incredibly kind of like potent, incredibly strong in their desire. So you're kind of like being watched what you do. You are kind of like being told, look, actually you can gain all the strength and admiration. So when I see the Six of Wands when it comes to relationships, like it kind of like gives me that pause, because it's not supposed to be about the victory, right? It's more or less supposed to be about, you know, kind of like how do we take life. But Six of Wands is also telling me that somebody really wanted to be kind of like uplifted, that somebody wanted to be important, that somebody really wanted to kind of like have, you see, just like him, look at, he's like all adorned. He kind of wants to be important. But like, I mean, usually the columns, especially the black ones in tarot, talks about the bad things. So somebody maybe was not even aware of basically how they were kind of like creating something. Or this is also giving you guys a new possibility of kind of like rebuilding yourself. The Magician is all about kind of like creation and kind of like moving forward. But the unfortunate part about the Magician is like it's not really emotional. It's kind of like, hey, you want to create nuclear war? Okay, got it, right? Kind of like, oh, it's kind of like taking an order without making any kind of like moral judgment in it. And that's what I'm thinking over here, even though certain things have created quite a bit of despair over here. Somebody was just still very proud about that. So it kind of like really shows that maybe you have been on the receiving end of something that really kind of like stinks. So let me see the reasons. And we have now mature man and toiling labor. Now, this is kind of interesting. Like there is like something that you're asking over here that really needs to be worked on. But I think the toil and labor, and especially here, this is like 3 and 8 and 11, it is really talking about this universal, again, very much divine, godlike kind of like card over here. It's telling you, look, something could not continue going anymore. Unless kind of like something can be picked up with complete kind of like transparency, it's going to be really hard to continue. Seven of Pentacles is like really talking about what happens after this death. Look at this, the devastation. He is picking up the pieces. So the reason was that somebody maybe needed to transform. Maybe somebody couldn't pick up the pieces at the time, but maybe they are doing it right now. Not everybody works on the same speed. Maybe this was you. Maybe you couldn't handle certain things. Maybe simply, as it said here, something was amiss, kind of in this whole kind of like situation. So let's see what kind of guidance you have. The Chariot. And it's kind of interesting because here was mature male, and now you have main female, and if you're a lady, that probably will be you, and distant horizons. So kind of like distant horizons is always to me a card of a travel, a card of like maybe distance. So maybe somebody is like literally physically distant, or maybe overseas, kind of like there is like some kind of like division over there. But it's also telling me that sometimes people can live next door to you, and they're like in the latest kind of corner, in the kind of deepest corners away from your heart. So that distance can actually be experienced that way. So there is like this sense of this distance, or maybe it is telling you that you need to distance yourself from it, right? Because the Chariot is again this card of trouble, and this card of like taking things in black and white where they never are. And but like sometimes when we meet people, never things are black and white. We always want to kind of accommodate and kind of like explore the other person, because whenever we get into black and white mode, the resolution cannot happen. Because even if you get first 3 answers, yes, yes, and yes, then maybe the end of the road is not going to be this way. I think that's how they used to kind of like sell those Hoover vacuums. When they used to go door to door, they would just come in and they would pound on it, and the whole secret to their selling was keep asking questions where the person is going to keep saying yes. Hey, do you like vacuum cleaners? Like something really, that of course every person would say yes. So they're starting to program their minds for people to also say yes when they will ask, are you going to sign this contract today? So for you though, you are getting this Princess of Swords. And Princess of Swords is, look, having an eagle. And her sword is kind of like raising here from this, I guess, lotus over here. The Chariot is like definitely telling you guidance is kind of like moving forward. Guidance is kind of like that strength of will of what is the best thing to do in the situation. It's telling you to kind of like, hey, move on, move forward, because it looks like this person that really did a number on you guys, and you kind of like, this is not necessarily you, but you're getting to the mode of, hey, I have to figure out this truth of what is going on, because that's what basically Princess of Swords does, right? She kind of like is, she's kind of like wearing the emblem of air. I don't know if you can see it over here, and has like here, and has this kind of like bold eagle, or the hawk, I don't know I think that's called hawk over here. And what is really important about the hawk sees the tiniest creatures, the tiniest details, just like what we have seen here on the ground, and her mind misses nothing, right? So the fact that this kind of like swords is kind of like rising from the lotus flower, it's basically separating good from evil. Just like in this card, we have this kind of like good and evil, if you wish. Are we going to be good? Are we not going to be good, right? So she kind of lives by her ideas and principles, and this is definitely asking you to kind of like start moving away from something by fully understanding that you have been, let's call it, devastated. You have been dealt with somebody who was like provocateur, with somebody who kind of like pushed you in out of your comfort zone, right? So she is not necessarily a silent type, right? So you might actually really go out of your own kind of like element and kind of like demand to answer, to demand to know the questions, the answers to certain questions. It's because this is your guidance. It's saying just like move ahead. Or maybe these answers can be just given to yourself, and you will know the truth. And it's kind of like understanding that all along you have been called to really see the situation and how even you can find yourself in this kind of like situation. So that's something, because it is also asking you, situation can happen like that where you're not supposed to lose your sense of who you are. You still are very seductive. You kind of like are who you are, and this is not to put a blame on yourself kind of like as a result. So let's see what can kind of like sidetrack you this month. Poverty and change, and then you have the World and the Empress reversed. And again, we have the same thing, kind of vision and looking down. Well, this poverty is again very much like this despair card to me, right? Where there is a difference. This is actually a more positive card than this one, because here's an adult who actually has to take care of the others as well. And it's kind of like feeling that somebody didn't take care of you, and somebody really didn't kind of acknowledge that you have a big heart, that you have been given this card, and somebody who has been very reckless, not only with your heart but also with their kind of like activities. And in spite of that, you were still kind of like opening and like reaching to them with the open arms, and it looks like nothing really was really benefiting them. But also the worst part was like, I mean, beware, not only beware what you wish for, but no good deed goes unpunished over here. That the more good that you did, the more it was kind of exploding in your face. Now here it's a child, and we have also a cat and a rat, and of course the conditions that we see here are not really the nicest conditions. But this child is actually still willing to work, whatever he is, kind of like dealing with the chimneys over here, and maybe dwelling in the situation where he's not supposed to be. I think this is kind of like what is telling me that this darkness and feeling of loss is actually going to start shifting. You can change it, but these two cards, both by the way were reversed, are telling me exactly where this change has to take place. The World means kind of like putting that dot, at the end of the sentence you put a dot. It's done, it's over, gone, dealt with. The World is like this card of now. There's certain things can happen, but when the World, and especially with the Empress, comes reversed, then this is really telling me that this whole situation has been so strenuous, that has been so important, that there is like something obviously karmic happening over here, that you are feeling that you still didn't close the door to something. The Empress reversed is telling me that most likely you're still clinging on the situation, on a person. And guys, I see so many signs over here that I pretty much think this can actually apply to anybody. I see Scorpio, I see everything: Pisces, Scorpio, Cancer over here, I see Sagittarius, Gemini. This would be in particular earth signs, but also Aquarius, Scorpio, Taurus, and Leo. And then again, we have also again additional Libra coming through. So as I said, energies coming are so strong that this kind of like almost looks like something was ripping you apart on so many levels. And there you are, I was talking about this card. And here you have a wealthy man in bad health, and then Queen of Pentacles, and then it is you. Remember how I said it's almost like this, but the fish is chasing its tail. So this is like telling you where to move forward. The wealthy man doesn't have to be man. I think this is not necessarily talking about excuse me, the money. This is it's kind of interesting. This is stopping you. Maybe it is talking about the money. Maybe it is talking about the child support. Maybe it is dealing with somebody who kind of like has money but is willing to make you suffer and willing to let you pick up the pieces. Maybe this is why I had this cough all of a sudden happening, because usually nothing happens as a coincidence, especially when you do the reading. Bad health tells me that you guys need to pick yourself up and you need to kind of like reestablish yourself. The Queen of Pentacles is somebody who kind of like knows her finances, who understands and is willing to enjoy, like kind of sort of like the finer things in life. And maybe for a while you haven't had that, because she's the closest one to the Empress, and she's actually the one who is very, very beautiful, right? Who is capable of creating anything from nothing, you know. So it's the person who's going to go to, well, what do you call it, one of those stores where you can get the used goods, and she will be able to buy materials and make the most beautiful kind of like attires. So she actually will not ever be poor. So it's very much unlike all of the stuff. And something is possibly making you sick over here, because she is the person who is mature and who is actually prosperous, right? So she's also really liking food, but she's also kind of like sometimes a bit of a health nut, right? So maybe you're moving into kind of like that level as well. But you know, it's kind of like really interesting, because you did have this Princess of Swords here, which kind of like was that sense of, you know, kind of like needing to speak the truth over something. She is kind of like anybody that turns to troubles for their troubles when they need to something, right? But sometimes she, I think, needs to kind of like have some time off for herself, because I think this is really telling me, especially because this is telling me this is you, that you have been too much of a martyr, you know, doormat. You guys really need to stop with this. You need to kind of position yourself that you are important. This is really telling me that you're forgetting yourself in the process. You did forget yourself in the process. You kind of like, whenever is this time to take a breather, to kind of relax, you've been in a situation that somebody else needed you. No, you kind of like need to put yourself first. That's why such a very strong card is being shown here. Everybody's coming with their problems. Oh, I have this, this is happening in my life. You at one point are going to get so worn down that you will not be able to function. This is definitely telling you that you are kind of like getting out and telling you, get out of that fog, kind of like know where you are going. And this is nothing wrong about not helping others while you need to recharge your batteries, right? So did you ever see a computer or a phone at the end of the batteries? You can kind of type all you want, it's just going to shut off. So if you don't want a complete shutdown of you or who you are, you kind of like really need to say that right now you cannot help, you are the one who need help. You need to be able to express this. So let's see, as far as this couplehood, You might have a child with this person, right? Or it's going to be lots of messages. You know what? This could be also divorce that I see over here, and hence it's going in all directions. Maybe there is like a fight over money now when I really look at it, because look at here. We have like this Three of Swords, and the swords at this stage very much unlike here. You see here things are being born out of justice, while here everything is kind of like mournful, and obviously somebody is still feeling this pain. I have a feeling in your situation there was some other person that has been messing up your relationship, or there was like definitely a situation that just like didn't leave too much to be desired, in terms of, you know, you really didn't have much doubt about what is going on. The child can also mean something from the past being brought to the present and being dealt with. I think that you are fully aware that it was like crowded relationship, but for some reason you're still kind of like stuck in thinking about it, kind of like, you know, my John Travolta kind of a fellow over here, wondering like, okay, so what is it I really need? Maybe somebody wanted to explore to see, hey, I'm not so sure if this is who I want, etc., etc., thinking that, you know, there is like no impact on a person, but it was a huge emotional impact on you. Like you have all the water cards coming out here, all of them. So for you, it kind of like shook you down to a core, and you kind of like can't recover from it. So this, at the minimum, is a huge rejection. And it's not only a huge rejection of you, it looks like it's a rejection of who you are as a person, what you can contribute, and also of your kind of like little family. And let's see, lastly, what karma says over here. Wow! You know what? Some things come to an end, and by putting them to an end, by putting this behind you, by turning this to the friends and people who are there for you, who do understand your greatness, who do understand how much you can help and contribute, right? And they're like, you have supportive people that you didn't even know. You are able to build something for you, whatever you want. If some situation was so karmic that somebody was testing you like job and kind of torturing you, right now there is your time to benefit. There is your time where you can actually start moving ahead and enjoying it the way you should be. I think, guys, you're going into something new, something that is going to really last this long term. Look at this. Like somebody looks like was chipping away kind of like certain walls, and poof, they're down, and there's like this big new beginning that is going to go all the way from 1 to 10. It is like whoosh all the way. Let me see, because this is an ace. I want to actually clarify this. And look, I'm getting a thief reverse. I think you're moving away from this person with full understanding. Look, you know, maybe I had a hole in my pocket, but no longer. This is actually amazing, a repair you are actually going to do to yourself, but simply you really need to move away from that individual. I can see it was a lot of pain, and I can see it was really, really hard for you to it was really hard for you to even understand why would somebody do that. And trust me, not everybody is like everybody else. Sometimes you have people who just completely reckless with other people's heart. So this is really was call for looking at you, how you're handling this. Are you going to focus on yourself? Are you going to put yourself first? I do see that all this kind of like stuff from the past is happening, and you're wondering about all the sacrifices that you have made, and wow, what should I just let go of all of that? Well, if this means that your happiness is elsewhere, maybe it is the time to do that, because that's why I'm seeing here, yes, you're definitely thinking about somebody, and there is like some kind of like pause into, wait, I have been there all along for him or her, and have kind of like embraced them with both of my arms, so why could not I receive the same? So Pisces, I have pulled one more card for you, which also is 12, just like the Hangman. And now this is kind of like what makes it interesting, because sometimes we feel this kind of like sacrifices have been in vain, but just also you have to understand that this could be just a general reading and not necessarily you, so you can contact me for the private reading. But look what this one is saying: a change in the wind. So let me kind of like tell you, because you are getting these Queen of Pentacles, Ten of Pentacles, Ace of Pentacles. You're actually moving to a phase of a greater prosperity for you and for your loved ones. So this is the message that you're getting. It says, as you endeavor to create a prosperous life, you may encounter unexpected reversals that cause you to shift directions. This is a good thing, so there is nothing to fear. Perhaps an opportunity you sought went to someone else. Perhaps you pursued something that you suddenly realize is not in your highest good. You might not be 100% clear on where you need to go, but you are certain that things are not going as planned. Circumstances are not in your control right now. Wait it out. All will be well, even better actually. Trust. And that's what I see, guys. This period, whatever it is, just keep putting one foot in front of another. Keep acknowledging that if you feel a certain way, and especially if this is pain, that you shouldn't be feeling that way, that nobody should actually subject you to that kind of stuff. Start repairing that fabric that you're made of. Start putting yourself first, because you have lots of people around you who care about you and who want to be giving toward you. So right now it is your time to be helped, and don't be shy asking for it, because you guys have something really wonderful. Karma is moving in a good direction, moving you away, and that was the message all along. Somebody robbed you of maybe money, but also something really essential of who you are, because you didn't feel as strong as a person because of this person making that mark on you. And this is enough. I think it is time to bury all of that stuff and start moving forward in a much better direction. So my dear Pisces, I hope this helps, and as I said, if you want a private reading with me, contact me via cattarot.ca, and buckle up this month. It's going to be a very important one for you. Love you.